computed the coordinates of the peak, and that's what he was giving me. And I was there.
You felt it physically. Did you see it or did you just feel it?
No, it was just a physiological reaction on my whole body. I was
Exactly
trembling,
as
I
if you were
was freezing
on
cold,
a peak.
and I was very afraid of falling.
Wow.
I was falling. And
had you had any of these that didn't work? Did they try any?
Yes, sure. I'm not. You should not use me as a remote viewer to launch. I'm not. You should not use me as a remote viewer to launch. A tomahawk over somewhere.
So it was.
That's a problem that, of course, the army has. Is it good enough so we can launch a rocket to destroy that thing?
Who is the best at it? Who's the best at remote? Is there one person that's consistently accurate?
There are a couple, and they are not. Ingo was known because he wrote about it and so on. Many of them, Joe McMonigal is probably the best one alive today. He described a structure, and he described a ship that was being built by the Russians, which was a super submarine in a hangar somewhere. And the Navy just laughed at him. They said, "It's crazy. It's in a hangar, away from the sea. So why would you build a ship, when
everything's good.
The ocean?
I just got to stop for gas."
Turned out he was right. It was a super class new Soviet submarine. It described the inside of the building, which had no windows and so on. And from a satellite, they could see the building, but they couldn't see inside the building. They described what was inside the building. They described the submarine. They described the length, and he actually measured it psychically. And that turned out to be right. And then when the submarine was built, they brought some bulldozers and they dug, a channel to the sea, and off it went.
This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Being independent is good, but you should, or hell, even your dog, whether you're working on personal relationship, and even more importantly, you can switch therapists if it's not.
Those things were extraordinary.
I had heard about this, but I didn't know it was that accurate.
Yeah, that happened, and he was, as opposed to, one of us. He was right. Enough of the time that you could rely on what he was describing, and also they came up with a way of measuring, actually quantifying the value of your perception. So I told Ingo, let's do another one because I'm on a roll here. After the speak in the end, he said, "No, Jacques, you're going home now." I said, "No, it's 9:00. We've only been here half an hour. Why are you sending me home? I mean, this is great. I got it." He said, "Yeah, you got it. You don't need all the levels. I mean, you got to the top level. You were there."
Why did he want to send you home?
He said, "I want you to stay with that feeling. I don't want to do another one that you miss and so on. I want you to keep that in mind because you got the whole thing."
Is this based on past experiments and the way they were achieving results?
Yes.
So he didn't want to bombard you with
every test subject.
Right. So he didn't want to give you another experience. He wanted you to take that experience and just sit with it.
Keep the experience with me during the day because I got the whole signal.
Right. And did you feel like that if you did that, it would aid you in your ability to do it in the future?
It would. Yes, I would lose that sense of direct access to something that bypasses the brain. I'm basically, I was trained in mathematics and physics and astronomy, So I use the part of my brain that's analytical. And I'm a good programmer, computer programmer. So, uh, this is not. This is very different. This is grabbing a signal which has everything in it, you know, and being able to to catch it
Yeah, I
very
was watching that.
fast and just get a little bit of information
Watch this guy.
and catch it again, recall it. You know, that's what we're doing that, you know, 5 times, 6 times, 10 times, until making sure that you don't try to name it, you don't try to put, you know, a description on top of it. It's just stay with the signal. And that, I think that's an amazing contribution from what Dr. Puthoff and Tag and some of the subjects did.
Was there a specific way that you achieved a state of mind that made you more able to perceive these coordinates or perceive from what signal you're getting from a remote viewing?
There was, I had a lot of admiration and love for, you know, for what he was capable of doing, and you know his art and his personality and so on. He was, you know, very much.
Yeah, it's in the Gulf, so Gulf of America.
And here,
there's a lot of them out there.
It was the structure also of the experiment. You know, I trusted what he was trying to teach me. I've always.
So you were open to it.
Yes.
You trusted it, so you were open to it.
I had, you know, both the admiration and the trust.
Did he ask you to put your mind in a specific place? Was there a way of counting yourself into?
The idea is not to put my mind into it, just to let it. Just because my mind is analytical,
right?
Of course, and you know, I was always very good in math. You know, I mean, you have to be if you're going to be an astronomer, and so I can be very structured and so on. This is not structured. This is boom, and then you can begin to analyze it, but you have to analyze it keeping your rational mind, you know, away from.
So you just have to let the information come to you somehow or another, and not try to imagine the information or create the information
or perceive what it is.
Right, just let it happen to you. And so you had seen him do this, and so you knew that this was a valid field of research. So you were just open to it, and you just sat down there and tried to let it happen to you. Did it happen any other time that resembled the Andes Peaks, where that you have that overwhelming feeling of cold and falling? Did you have that feeling with anything else?
Yes, I had some of that, but this one was, you know, just completely shocking because it was, and I think that's a characteristic of the when you really get it. You know,
right.
There is no question. And you know, in the movie Patton,
yes.
Patton is sent to North Africa.
I grabbed a couple stacks from the office there, so I think I should be good.
Rommel is there with his tanks. The American army isn't ready to invade Europe, but wants to start, you know, controlling.
As much as I'd like to, I don't need to.
There is a lieutenant there with a jeep that takes him to
some water here. Got a couple Crustables.
There was a battle, and you know, the Americans were decimated. You know, by Rommel was just genius, you know, German general. Great with tanks, just like Patton considered him as his major, you know, enemy because both of them understood tanks, and so Patton gets in the jeep. That's in the movie. It's just absolutely perfect. I've checked that this was historical, you know, exact in the movie. They drive to the site of the battle, and they get.
There's a piggy here, but I don't see him.
and they get to a fork in the road, and the driver takes to the left, and Patton said, "Son, why don't we go to the right? Because that's where the battle was." And the driver says, "Sir, with all due respect, I mean, I was very."
I ate pretty good for lunch, so
he said, "Trust me, go to the
some chicken
They go
paprikash.
to the right, and they get to the edge of the big plain. And Patton says, "This is where the battle was." Hannibal came from the left with his elephants, and the battle was there, and I had been there.
Yeah, I think these are great. They're good though.
Patton thought that he was reincarnated from a Roman general who had been at that battle against Hannibal and his elephants. And the poor driver said, how did this happen? How did I get here with this general who thinks he's reincarnated? Who fought against
Brooklyn,
him.
Ohio.
And
it's a city I'm in.
I've worked with people, as you know, I've run a number of venture capital funds with people who had that kind of intuition, and you think finance is driven by greed and so on, but at some level, greed doesn't really matter. It's getting to the truth of something, especially in venture capital, where you're going to change the way things are done. With these gadgets, with computers, with rockets and so on. You're going to go to a new generation of things. So it hasn't been done before. And the financial people, you've got 10 engineers in front of you who can do it. There's one who will succeed and 9 who's going to fail. And you have to pick the thinking that's going to succeed. I mean, it's not the money and it's not the technology. It's the mind of the driver who say, no, let's go to the right, let's not go to the left. Patton was extraordinary in that. I mean, he was a remote viewer. He demonstrated that again.
Why are the sheets not?
There are some interesting books that I've collected from some of his lieutenants.
You would also have to consider that's an extraordinary state of mind. To be a general in world war and the consequences of everything you do and what is at stake in this war is got to be a state of mind. It's very, very unusual. With so many consequences, so much pressure, that it probably makes some signals more clear if you have that ability to perceive them, because you must be in a heightened state of awareness.
Yes.
Because just of the consequences of your life.
Be right back.
Exactly. But you also have to be detached. I mean, eventually he's going to go to the battlefield where the bodies of soldiers who've been killed, they're burning tanks and everything else. They show that in the movie. I mean, that's where he's supposed to go.
Yeah.
But, his mind is at a different level. And
when did they first start researching this? So when did they believe that this was an ability that some people had?
Way back in antiquity.
Really?
Yeah. And they had seers that the king would go consult whether he should engage in a war with.
Right.
They had the Greeks had the Pythia, who was a woman who they had an area, a volcanic area where there were fumes coming out of the earth, that was supposed to be one of the doors to the underworld and so on. And there was a special cult around that place. And, the king would go there before a great decision and would ask the message from the underworld, or the message from the mind of the woman who was interpreting what was coming from the earth. So that has been regarded as Hitler, Adolf Hitler, was in his before the war, when he got to be the leader of Germany, he exhibited, and he very much believed in those powers. I think he got to the point where he trusted it too much, and he started making mistakes, and that could be used against him.
Well, he was
because
also doing
the
a lot
ego,
of drugs.
you have to get the ego out of the way, and
Right.
of course that's the hardest thing, for us to do.
Especially to a narcissist dictator who's on drugs.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
Well, that's always the age-old problem with seers. Like, how do you know who's a charlatan and who's real? Because there's always a bunch of fake psychics. There's fake palm readers, fake tarot card readers, people that are just con artists, that are just trying to swindle people out of money. But that doesn't discount the possibility that some people have these bizarre abilities. And that is something that people have nice forever. Especially in modern day reductionist culture that likes to only look at things that are, tried, true, proven, agreed. And then
grab something real quick.
This concept that
Fucking cough, man.
I think, in science, the burden is on you as a scientist to come up with an experiment that will discriminate between the random things and will give you guides to.
Well, I think that's what they've done with the telepathy tapes, and I'm hoping the success of this, and then they're going to do a whole series on it, where they're doing a documentary and they're showing all the footage. So you're going to be
All right, 11 o'clock, 11:02. It
I'm
says
hoping
be home.
that this stops the ridicule, because there's a bunch of scientists and
Eastern time
is with the UAP topic as well. The UFO topic as well. I think there's a bunch of people that don't want to consider it because there's too much bullshit out there, and there's too much of a possibility that you could look like a fool. And to a very respected scientist whose research is very important, as we were talking about this, with the IBM thing, where there's hundreds of millions of dollars that are dedicated towards these, why would you risk all that and the credibility of all that on this nonsense about people seeing things with their brain in a closed room, finding coordinates, pretending they're on top of a mountain, all that kind of stuff?
Well, fortunately, in California, there are people who can take risk. And
my wife told me to go get checked by the doctor, but I'm hoping this clears up soon. We'll see when the weather settles.
And as you know, I come from France.
I don't wake up coughing; it just hits me a little fix once in a while.
Very hard to do that, because the system is very structured and very conventional. So
Right.
even though France has had some of the brightest people in that kind of research,
So it's just a cultural limitation of the culture.
sort of everything has to be rational.
But an idiot does not know how to merge.
And they also, as you know, France has had for a long time a project on UFOs, an official project, and
Hey, Diogenes.
takes reports from the public and they investigate them. And it's a very small team, but they have access to all the resources of French research, so they can get the weather people, they can get the Air Force, they can get
Heading home. About an hour and 45 minutes from home.
Tap into the resources of a lot of different departments of the government. So it's very powerful. So they will explain. They find a rational explanation for about 95%, which is true.
Them boys got a death wish.
Been there.
So it's about 95%.
Yeah. It's not hoaxes. Those are people who really think that they've seen something unusual. What was unusual to them may have been the moon rising through the fog, and it looks like an elongated disc, and then after a while, things change and so on. And they really think they've seen a flying saucer coming over. There are about 200 or 250 possible physical things that really could surprise you, that are unusual.
It was moving, wasn't they?
Create conditions under which a normal person would think that they are in the presence of a UFO. Then, what's interesting is the other 5%.
Yes.
The other 5% is.
I don't care how good of a motorcycle driver you are, you still got to rely on everybody else not doing something stupid.
From the French Air Force.
When you're on the freeway, I'll never rely on that.
Jet over Morocco that was flying, and there was a radar tracking the jet, and I had the reports from the French Air Force with the chart, and that the thing he was chasing went up, all in a fraction of a second, went to the top of the atmosphere, just like the Nimitz case. So
they'll never get caught.
I mean, they are in the files.
Unless they stop.
Take the trouble to look at the files.
And they're in the files far back enough in history that it's impossible to imagine human technology achieving these things.
Absolutely. Well, especially in the 50s.
Right. Well, the Kenneth Arnold case
that had gone into space.
Yeah, there's a bunch of cases that
I care less about people that drive that fast. Just don't endanger everybody else.
Using propeller planes.
I mean, you're putting your trust into every other driver on the road, and every other driver on the road.
Technologically, it's not
sucks.
possible to imagine that someone had gone that far beyond us. Now we are in that time where you see things, you go, well, how much of that is some sort of top secret government program, some military program, and they have drones that can move at extraordinary speeds with some undisclosed propulsion system. That's possible today, at least theoretically. We entertain those ideas, but back then, this is one of the more fascinating things. I told you last night that I consumed 3 of
about an hour.
In the last 6 months.
4 new desktop phones set up.
The series of 3 that
updated
that had a bunch of different encounters. Not just right now. I'm
updated all the rest of the equipment there, and I'm done. It took about an hour.
The ones on various contacts
hour and a half
people have had, and the similarity of these stories, and they go way back.
Not bad at all.
Way back before it was sort of a cultural artifact. Like right now, I think in people's minds, the gray aliens are so iconic. A flying saucer like that. That's a copy of the model from Bob Lazar's adventures. In pop culture, to the point where you almost would expect to see them. You look for them. If you see something, you could imagine that you could twist it up in your mind and make it like that. But the problem is these stories go way before that. They're too similar. They go a long, long way back, and there's too many that are very, very similar to what we're talking about today, to the point where a rational person would have to say, maybe there's something more.
Yeah, got off, had a quick dinner, shot all the way out there, got it done within an hour. I should be home by about 11 o'clock my time.
From Burgundy,
your time too.
France, from a few centuries ago, the Duke of Burgundy was under attack. There was a lot of turmoil in French politics, and the king was fighting the great nobility and so on, was in cahoots to get rid of the king and so on. And they were going to be attacked. And he needed money to raise an army, and he appealed to people in Burgundy to send him money. And this was a token that they would, the king, the duke, would give people who had given him money to raise this army. And on the face of it is this disc that's holding up, that's protecting the land from forces above. There are all these arrows raining down on the land, and the land is
the turnpike at about 5 miles. So we can open it up a little bit.
It doesn't mean that
I'm being careful with speed.
Also at that time, but the idea has always been there of.
I just did my taxes, and I owe
objects.
I owe big time.
That were not meteors, that were not all the natural explanation. That were real discs. You find that in.
Well, I was paying to do my taxes while paying that for the software to do my taxes, and still owing over 10 times what I paid just for the software.
Yes. You see, it's protecting.
Actually, not as bad as last year. It still sucks. They didn't get a penny from me till April 15th.
Thunder clouds above. Well, there were a few of those things in history, and I've collected those I
wouldn't do it if I wasn't.
Couldn't that be interpreted as a shield?
I wasn't compensated. I wouldn't be doing it.
Well, it is shown as a shield.
Do that for friends for free, but
that's going to stop.
Usually it's even harder.
But that's what they used to stop arrows back then. They used a shield.
Yes.
So that doesn't just make. That doesn't seem to me to be a UFO. It seems to me to be a shield that they would protect.
Yes, but it's also, it's not exactly the shape of a shield. Most shields are oblong, and some of them are round. But the point is, it's hovering in the sky, protecting the land underneath.
Okay.
And
I think some of the more compelling stuff is like the stuff in the ancient Hindu scripts, the Vimanas and all these different flying crafts that people described. That they've always been a thing that people have described.
And we've been able to trace it to actual investigations or actual records, because, of course, when people describe something like that, especially if there was some sort of being associated with it, it could be the devil, it could be
right.
So they had to see a priest and confess, and they were in trouble if you reported that thing. Most of the time, you'd be in trouble,
right?
Because it couldn't be a normal thing.
I'm not allowed in Canada.
Today, they just fire you from wherever you work.
Yeah,
for a couple of reasons.
At least they don't burn you alive anymore.
And people, that's lucky. But people do have a legitimate fear of being ridiculed, and that can stop.
I knew I had to get over it. I knew this idiot wasn't even going to be doing the speed limit.
They're in. You don't want to think, oh, there's Kooky Bob over there who thinks the aliens are watching us.
The best cases I get are from executives in Silicon Valley whose family has seen something or who have seen something, and they've described UFOs to me, and that they cannot.
So that looks way different. So that coin is much more compelling because that looks like something flying in the sky above the city. That doesn't look like a shield at all. And what is that peak at the bottom of it? Yeah, that's very different.
You can tell that those things have been in the culture.
Yeah.
Now they've sort of repressed in the culture. And the anthropologists don't want to look at that.
But there's a really old painting that, like a biblical painting of these people that look like they're flying around and like seated in these crafts.
Yes.
They're in the sky. I've never seen any sort of a conventional explanation. What is that artist depicting?
So usually the explanation when you read what the historians have said. It's supposed to be
Okay.
Some god or some higher
Yeah, that's the way we'll put it.
That's coming to protect people and so on. But when you look at the detail,
I would be the first person
really
deported from Canada. And
really looks mechanical.
See if you can find that image, Jamie. You know the one I'm talking about.
What do they call it? What do they call a green card in Canada?
The one on the lower right.
Holy shit! What's this?
The lower, what is that? That looks like a craft. It looks like
Something
someone seated in a craft.
It's an envoy from God or an angel who's been sent. But the problem with those is that the painting, it may relate to something that was written in the 3rd century. But the painting is a 16th century painting.
Right.
So we didn't look at that much. I mean, it's interesting like the one with the Virgin with the. So it may be that the artist was witness to something and wanted to memorialize it and put it in his painting, but it's not tied to the time of the Virgin.
Right. He just added it.
So in our book, we stayed away from that. We wanted to go to records. Somebody who actually testified or something.
Right, not just one. But it just is very bizarre that this artwork continued to paint people in lives.
And there's a communication with the man who's looking at it, and there's a sense of that he's actually seeing it and having a sense of what it is.
It's like an Easter egg that someone put into the painting.
So this may be that the artist sort of put that in as a side. Of course, the main theme is the Virgin and the Child.
There's that one over there, Jamie, in the second row that says "Inside Ancient Yemen." What the hell is that? That's what really freaks me out is the paintings on cave walls that look just like grays.
Golden brown card.
Yeah.
These bizarre paintings of things that just look like they are people wearing helmets.
And, the most interesting to me comes from the Sahara. The friends who are anthropologists who worked with the UN in Africa and so on, in part of the Sahara, and one theory they have is that the culture that eventually moved to Egypt came from the Sahara. So I say, well, the Sahara is just sand. Well, it's just sand today. But we know that at one time it was flourishing. There were forests, there was water. In fact, there is water, but it's underground water. It's a large amount of underground water. There was a sea there at one time. So there probably was an earlier civilization, and some of those come from the Tassili. The Tassili is a region in the Sahara where there are a lot of those representations. So there were a lot of people living there at one time, and they painted that on the rocks.
See if you can find it. Yeah, and then you see similar things that indigenous people in Australia have painted. Similar things. It's all over the world.
Yes.
In completely separate environments, very similar features in these cave paintings.
And well, I think archaeologists wouldn't disagree with that. I think I would say the problem is that we don't correlate it. I mean, they didn't write anything.
Right.
We don't have a good correlation, so we have to keep looking for that. But that's fascinating. But in our book, we made the rule that number one, we don't want isolated human figures, even with suits and so on. We really want a device, a flying device. Otherwise, you could fill 40 books. with images of strange creatures.
Right.
What are the things that people see, around the ranch now, in Utah,
Yes.
Arizona. So, have to be careful on the boundaries of those things.
Gotta do what you gotta do.
We wanted
I don't make enough on my day job.
get to a place where there was testimony about somebody seeing a flying disc that was strange.
Got some good
to
pictures.
them in their culture. And remember,
Me and the
those
grandbaby
cultures,
last
those were
Saturday.
agricultural cultures. So with people who are used to interpreting the weather, looking at the phases of the moon, looking at the rising time of the sun, and all that was important for their agriculture. So they knew their environment very well, better than we do as people living in cities. So we can take that to some extent that has a scientific value, especially when you can build a model of a number of those.
Okay, we only got 102 miles to go. We're good.
Book, we were careful to break the book into sections corresponding to different evolution of the culture, explaining first a couple of pages what was happening during that time in terms of new inventions. The telescope.
My wife took a bunch. She didn't send them to me yet.
When certain things were discovered and so on. So we were careful to.
I fed her and
context with every.
She kept falling asleep every time I held her.
The description by the witness.
Left that belly.
Context.
Nice and comfy for her.
Thorough and very objective, which is what I really enjoyed about it, where you were very clear what we absolutely knew and very clear what could be nonsense.
Yeah, weather wasn't all that great. It wasn't that bad either, though. We went to we took her out on her first dinner. She slept through the whole thing just about, but dinner was nice. Went to this place called Sam Hill.
Again, now it gets more
pretty good
because now you have a bunch of people that realize
got a hanger steak with chimichurri on it.
Story and then talking about it and selling the book. And I think there's people that are grifters, and I think they, probably have few of them on. they are capitalizing on this desire that people have for stories.
Also now we think that the government has the answer.
Yeah.
So people spend their time, writing to different agencies and listening to reports from pilots, which is fine, of course, and people in the military, people in the intelligence community, and those are very valuable. Because they have instruments, actually see on the F-18 and so on. They're covered by radar, and by AWACS, and everything else. So we can rely on that. Many people like the numerical aspect. I don't do that. I don't pretend to have access to that. We had access to Bigelow, and the Bass, to some of that. Including some of the classified things that had happened. But there is a much richer pool of data, which is, a friend tells me about a sighting in the country somewhere. I can go there, I can go see the people, and I can find out, exactly what happened. And I continue to do that. And that's most of my data. And it's 10 times bigger than the stuff they talk about from the Pentagon. It's real data, and I don't need to have a clearance to go see the people, sit down. If I'm lucky, they'll invite me for lunch, and I can talk to the kids, I can talk to my wife, I can talk to the people who took care of the cattle, and they'll tell me. And that's where most of my information is coming from.
Reading a message,
It's not,
work message.
It's just very much in your face, and it's consistent.
What's the Sam Hill? Yeah, that's what I said. Look it up. It's a pretty good menu. Sam Hill, Ann Arbor.
Question. Many of the descriptions have to do with discs. Different sizes. You know. Some of them are very large. A number of descriptions have to do with, you know.
Oh, no, not chicken curry. It was a hanger steak with a chimichurri on top. No. Yeah, it's like almost like a pesto. Then I had baby potatoes with it and broccolini. And a nice IPA.
Physicists interpret as maybe plasma, but plasma doesn't survive in the air, shouldn't survive in the air more than a minute maybe. But people
I like chicken curry.
Seen some of those things for minutes and longer, long enough to take pictures of it and so on. And it's not necessarily glowing, it's not necessarily luminous the way plasma would be. So we don't know what they are, and they've been reported.
Yeah, it wasn't cheap.
All over the world.
What? Four adults and
paintings of that kind of thing from the 18th century.
My daughter-in-law's daughter.
Yeah. So
she's like 13.
Like published.
So 5 of us was like $250.
What are the most compelling paintings? What are the most compelling paintings that we can find right now from like 1700s, 1800s?
I think there is a beautiful painting of hills and 3 blue spheres that are not.
Margaire 5678. Thanks for the follow on Rumble.
Very distinct blue spheres that somebody recorded it. Somebody did a painting of the scene. Those are things that people wanted to remember because they knew it was.
And what year was this framed from?
I don't remember.
That's right.
16th and 17th century.
Do you know the name of it? Like, so Jim could try to find it.
No, I could send you the picture.
Okay. So
yeah. Unfortunately, it's like 3 blocks away from my son's house. So
this is
first time he's gone there, but he'd like to be able to go back.
And the couple that you had in one of your books from, was it the mining people from was it California or was it?
I wrote a book.
The Shape
with
of
Paola Harris called Trinity, about an egg-shaped.
It's hard to do with 2 cars and a baby too.
White sands. That now we have
Someone's getting caught.
Investigated it. The first book was criticized, and appropriately by someone.
I've done that since I was a teenager.
To enough of the written records, but now we've done that. So we've republished the book. It's called Trinity, and it covers 3 cases. In all 3 cases, the object is egg-shaped, the size of a medium-sized truck. It would fit in this room, about the size of this room. Then there is a case in Socorro, and there is a case in Valençon. Socorro and Valençon, and people have concentrated on the first one. They want to, because it's 2 years before Roswell, and there were witnesses there. Roswell, there were no witnesses. People who came later found the stuff and reconstructed the story, and it's a very interesting story. But at Trinity, they saw it arrive and they saw it crash. and they were there for 10 days afterwards, watching the recovery. And they went inside. One of them went inside, and his father went inside also. So we have a very rich description of that. And where is it in the literature? Nowhere. I know Paola Harris found this, did research for 4 years on that, and then told me about it. And then we did another 4 years of research together at the site, and we found a lot of correlations. But there, the Socorro case and the Valençol case.
Could you explain? Tell me before we move on to those other cases, what correlations did you find?
Well, in all three cases, it's an egg-shaped object. In all three cases, there are traces that could be seen, could be described, could be analyzed. In all three cases, the beings are short. They are about 3 feet, 3.5 feet. They breathe air. And what kind of extraterrestrial is that comes here and breathes the air? Okay, we don't go. If we go to the moon, we're not going to breathe the air.
How do we know that it breathes at all? How do we know that these things breathe at all?
Just because they had no breathing.
Right. But how do we even know that they're
normally?
Biological?
They had 2 eyes, a small nose, a small mouth.
But couldn't they possibly be some sort of a creation? Instead of being a biological entity, couldn't they be some sort of artificial life?
So I've asked Gary Nolan about that. I'm not a biologist, and I think it would be known if somebody had created a meta-human.
I don't mean somebody. I mean another life form from somewhere else.
There were stories of the Russians actually thinking about creating a dwarf, human, to pilot their ships because they didn't expect to have the energy, to have a big rocket. And so now they found that
so they were trying to get tiny people to power their ships because they were lighter.
But the CIA was looking into rumors that the Russians in the 50s, before Sputnik, that the Russians were trying to create a humanoid that could pilot a spaceship.
Well, I know that the Russians, there was some talk of them trying to create a human-ape hybrid. They were trying to do something with chimpanzees, try to create some sort of a human-chimpanzee hybrid for war, which is a terrifying thought. That they would, first of all, if they were successful.
That's crazy, man.
But just that they were...
Yeah, we get a lot of fake springs, too.
Creating a race of chimpanzee human warriors.
There was no, to my knowledge, there hasn't been any correlation of that. And the creatures that are described in Socorro, in New Mexico, and in Valençol, in France, so those are 3 cases that I've been very involved in from the beginning, from day one, involve creatures that are about 3 feet tall, that breathe our air, recognize our signals, communicate with us in funny ways, even mentally. I mean, the witnesses describe getting images in their minds and so on, in all 3 cases. And what's interesting is people can argue about Trinity all they want, like they argue about Roswell, but the case in Socorro and the case in France, in Valençol, were investigated by governments, not by the local UFO group, although the local UFO group did a good job in all those cases. But they were, in Socorro, it was first the local police, local policemen saw the craft and the beings, described what happened. He was terrified when the thing took off. He thought it was something to do with some new gadget or some work in the desert. It's an area that's still in the same state.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of construction right here.
Back there with Dr. Finance.
These last 5 miles, next 2 miles.
A few months
They literally have signs up that say rough road.
several times. And so after the police, turned out the FBI was in town.
No rough roads on a turnpike. There should be at least one lane that is
case was
perfect.
A federal case, but they helped preserve the traces, the FBI way. And the local police was happy to have them there. And then there was the state police came in and did an investigation, and then people from the base, came
rough
in
road,
with
next mile.
experts in,
It's been like that every mile for the last 6.
Of weapons and rockets and so on, because they felt it.
Actually, that fast lane looks smoother, but
from the Trinity range, that was out of its way and had crashed near Socorro, in which case they might have.
It's not that bad, but still, it's no reason for it. I understand one lane getting bad, but when you're
very serious. I have the whole
you're paying tolls to drive on the road.
Nobody's looking at it. I mean, the investigation in Washington now, they'll say, we're going to look at the cases of the last 12 months.
They're not paying it.
What kind of science is that? Can you imagine scientists reading this? And this is the way they are going to solve the UFO problem, by looking at vague pictures of lights in the sky for 1 year. Why don't they go back to those records? Those are federal records. Okay? The case in Valençol, 5 agencies of the French government. So this guy was a farmer. He had a field where he was growing plants to make perfume. So this was high level, expensive crops. This wasn't just alfalfa or something. And he goes there at 5 o'clock in the morning because he wants to do something to water the thing so before the sun is up, because it's going to be very south of France. It's going to be very hot. You can't work in the field during the early afternoon. So he wants to be done with that. He sees this contraption, in the middle of the field, crushing the plants. And so he sneaks in, and he's paralyzed. Okay? Now, there is an egg-shaped object, just like the one, at Trinity, just like the one in Socorro. It's the size of a mid-sized truck. There are 2 creatures in front of it, human-looking, 2 eyes, breathing air. They look at him, sort of amused, and one of them has something in his belt. He takes out, points at him, and that's when he's paralyzed. Now, he's not.
I'm hoping it clears up before the first weekend of April. That's Hash Bash. I was planning on meeting MCC up there again this year. Walk around recording at Hash Bash in Ann Arbor.
The motor nerves, where you still be up and aware. You're not going to fall down in the heat. And
if it's fucking cold, I ain't doing it. Or raining.
Going back inside the thing, if it takes off like a shot out of a gun, and it vanishes in midair. Now, he goes to see the gendarmes. This man is fairly wealthy. He owns quite a bit of, several fields, expensive crops. His wife is the mayor of the town. The gendarmes are going to be very careful with him because he's also from the resistance in World War II. When he was young, he joined the resistance. And the resistance in that part of France fought in the Alps against the Germans. They were regarded as heroes of World War II. And so the gendarmes are very careful with him. There are some things he's not going to tell the gendarmes because he thinks, and I went there, he didn't want to talk to anybody from Paris, he didn't want to be on TV. he, he wanted to concentrate on his experience because he thought there was going to be something else. And he was aware of some of his buddies. This is a part of France where people talk, but they have secrets too. I mean, historically.
That's fine. That's awesome.
You know, things like that in the U.S.
Got to start somewhere.
People are not going to talk to strangers. The only reason I could go there was that I went there with the lady who was from Paris, was with the government. She was with de Gaulle's government. She had the rank of ambassador, and she had a vacation home there. So we went there for 3 days, and she knew everybody there. And he told us what he thought might happen again. And he didn't want the gendarmes.
Yeah, she'll probably be in bed when I get home.
Why did he think that something was
tell her in the morning?
They evidently, and you know,
oh, that's sweet.
Secrecy about what it was, but evidently there was communication with the beings when he was there.
Hopefully that doesn't affect your benefits too much.
Did they look like people? Did they have different features than us? Or was it just
they are just like the ones at Trinity and like the ones at Socorro. So in that book you have actually 2, 2, and 3. You have 7 creatures that are humanoid, that breathe our air, that seem to understand us. You know, the visual. There is visual contact. Well, we can have visual contact with animals. I mean, that doesn't mean they're human or meta-human, but there is messages that come through all of them that the witnesses are reluctant to talk about in all 3 cases. So in Socorro, finally, the Air Force went there. They flew the Air Force out because the Air Force said, well, that's just a gadget, from the base. And that was stupid. So they finally sent Dr. Hynek there. And Dr. Hynek asked me to organize the files that were coming. I was at Northwestern at the time, working. I had done my PhD already, and I was on the staff of the computing center. And we had a small team trying to help, free, trying to help Hynek keep the files together. So we were, in communication with him the whole time. And then I put the files together, and I have the file. This is the official file.
So these people were reluctant to talk about what these creatures were communicating with them. But did they talk about it at all?
It was very personal.
Very personal.
There had been a communication that transcended their life. There was something else. So you could almost call it a sort of a religious feeling, but it wasn't. It wasn't about divinity or God specifically, but it was about the other side of life, a bigger, meaningful life. That's their interpretation. It may not be. There may be other things that they're trying to communicate.
But it was very profound.
Yes.
And
they seem to be working.
Had similar stories in that regard.
And in all cases, there are traces that were measured. There is technology of sort. And in the case of Socorro, people came up with all kinds of ideas.
Well, it's just that one piece. Most of it's not bad.
Special balloon.
Still, none of it should be bad.
Well, in the book, and people haven't noticed it, but in the book, I was able to solve that problem because I found a transcript of a conversation with a man who was head of a motor pool at the on the Army range at White Uh, and he had given his team some instructions on how to make sure that the motor crew was working really well, because White Sands is so big. When people went home, they could get lost, at White Sands. And then how are you going to find them? I mean, there are tracks, but there is no paved road at the time. How are you going to, find them? So you can launch a helicopter the next day looking for, a lost car somewhere with a family in it. But so he made rules that they had to call periodically to report where they were when they went home, 50 miles away across the desert. So they could find them if there was something wrong with the car. He's driving home with his family. This is after the Sokola thing is done. You know, they are all interrogating Lonnie Zamora, the cop who was driving that thing. And he sees a light over the mountains in the southwest towards Mexico. But it's still, it's still in New Mexico, but it's in that direction. A light that's not the star, it's really bright. And the light gets brighter and brighter, and his car dies. Now he's head of the motor crew for the base. Everybody reports to him, and all the army cars and trucks and everything else, the half tracks. Um, so he looks at that thing. He tries to call his team. The radio doesn't work. The radio should work. The radio doesn't work. And the thing gets very bright, and then it recedes or goes away. Apparently came in. We
That
don't
was
know
me.
if
I
it
just
came in or if it
put
came
some
out.
activity in the chat.
Okay.
There's a couple people in there.
The
They're not
car
saying anything.
starts. He goes home. The next day, he goes to his shop. He gets his staff together. He says, "You guys are going to take this car apart. I want to see every screw and every piece of it and every level and everything and the seats and so on. I want to see all of that on the floor. And you're going to test it and you're going to tell me what's changed or if anything, how that car stopped in the middle of the desert." And they couldn't find anything. And that report was an official report, okay, that was never published, and it nails the whole thing, that this was not a balloon, this was not an hallucination. The patrolman wasn't drunk like they accused him of, or making up a story. And so on.
I only have one bot in there.
When Dr. Hynek interrogated him, he said he wanted to talk to a priest, and
Rumblebot.
to a priest before he would talk to Dr. Hynek. Okay? That's the kind of man he was. And they essentially destroyed this guy because they thought it was, bad reputation for the town of Socorro. Tourists wouldn't come there because they'd be afraid of strange things.
It was up to 8, now it's down to 2.
The Air Force said, well, it's a one witness.
I think it scared them off.
As this patrolman. So
I've gotten like two follows.
There was a guy who was driving on the main road, the same road
jumped up to 3.
patrolman had been driving, who the thing passed right over his car. He thought he was going to be driven off the road by this big oval thing that just went right over the roof of the car into the desert. Well, he called the police and reported it. There's a written report. He signed that report. We know his name. There were
without him having any knowledge of what happened.
That's right. I mean, he saw this. Some
independent.
One of your gadgets trying to drive me off the road. Right. There were several people on the road on the other side of this little, desert thing. That's when it rains, the water rains all over the place.
Yeah.
washes everything out, just sand and rocks.
Yeah, they
But
all
on the
scurried
other
away
side, there's
back
the
to their
main road.
caves.
Several people on the road saw the thing take off and reported it because it was just so strange. So the Air Force put that aside. They neglected to, this was, and they just kept saying it was a one witness case. It wasn't. Most of those cases where they say it was one witness, you have to look at you have to look for the other guys.
Mm.
And again, I brought you something. Can I tell you about it? So this is something that the case was so interesting that Dr. Nolan and I and a couple of friends brought it up and published it in the prime astronautics
Oh, okay.
review in the world. Okay, it's so after it took a couple of years for them to agree to look at it and so on, to look at the analysis. This happened in a suburb of Omaha, Nebraska, on the Iowa side. There's this town, a suburb with a park. This is about a week before Christmas in 1977. Okay? Um, People are there having a good time in the park in the evening. It's getting dark, um, and I want to make sure. Uh, they see something in the sky.
It's a trucking company, isn't
Looks
it?
like one of those boxes there. It looks like a round box with lights around it, and the lights are going around. So, and it's pretty high, and it's flying over the town.
I believe it's a trucking company.
And then a mass of steel, liquid steel, falls in the park. It falls on a levee in the park. There is about half a ton of it, liquid, glowing. It has no business being there. So you have this mass of metal. Obviously, they call
Glowing. It's molten.
yes. The weather is freezing. We know the temperature and everything else. It's freezing. But the grass is on fire. They call the firemen call the police. The police get
Oh, they're
there.
all around here.
The firemen get there. They
One in
start
Cleveland.
The fire is would have died by itself. There's no problem there. They take pictures of the thing glowing. I have the pictures, infrared, Polaroid pictures of the thing glowing in the grass, burning. Liquid, and it's going to stay liquid for a couple of hours, cools down gradually, and then people take pieces of it as souvenirs. So I have the pieces of it, and there they are. Now, uh, there was analysis done by two labs. Obviously, the question is where did that come from? And there's chromium, titanium, and iron, which you can find in ordinary steel, but this isn't really, the composition isn't exactly what you'd expect industrial steel to be. So one of the chemical analyses is done at the lab, for industrial steel. The investigators call the company. The company says, yes, we make steel. So we have furnaces, but we empty the furnaces. This is over a weekend. The factory is closed. There will be nobody there, and so there no liquid steel in our factory on that day.
Half a ton of it.
They have, yeah.
This is a half a ton.
Yeah. So So then they called the Strategic Air Command because B-52s fly over that town. The B-52 is a big thing, and the people saw something in the sky. So maybe it was the Air Force. Politely laughs at them and says, we carry atom bombs, but we don't carry furnaces with molten steel. Okay, so go look somewhere else. And I say, good luck. By the way, this is a way you could test it. This is a way. The Air Force, people think, number one, there is nothing in the Blue Book files worth looking at. That's not true. I spent 4 years. Dr. Hynek had copies of all the files. The files were not classified. There were a few random cases that were classified for other reasons, not because of the UFO, because of where it was, so whatever, that I didn't have access to. I was just a graduate student, PhD. We convinced, Dr. Hynek and I convinced the Air Force to do a computer file of everything they had about UFOs. Because before then it was just paper files all over the place. And if they were challenged at the time, they wouldn't be able to provide good my explanation for the cases. I did the whole thing, thousands and thousands of cases. They were right that majority were explainable. Okay. What we were looking for were the ones that were not explainable. This one cannot be explained. Okay. And there are enough of those, hundreds of those, that scientists could have looked at. Now, I went through the Air Force Base with my French passport. At the time, I wasn't a citizen. You had to wait 5 years before you could apply.
Well, this is
for citizenship. So I was working.
Rogan,
I had a
Joe
small
Rogan.
contract that was completely
He's chatting with this
unclassified to re
French dude,
calibrate
Jacques
statistics
Vallée.
of the Blue Book file. So I had access to essentially all the Blue Book file. But I went into the base with a clearance for 3 days with Dr. Hynek to go to the
Yeah, if I do any of his more popular interviews, YouTube will take me down.
And spent those 3 days with Major Quintanilla and his staff going through the files.
As long as it's just playing in the background and it's not a big name, they usually leave me alone. We'll see. I might get a strike for it.
Which at the
you don't see me on YouTube for a while, you'll know why.
So this is
my warning is done on the 17th. Actually, it should be done now.
This is your special collection of real stuff. And this is
that was done yesterday. The warning is
steel.
So it should be at zeros.
So that's the area where the
mass of steel glowing.
And so this steel you can make on Earth. This is
yes.
It's a composite of
a bunch of
different materials.
It's not exactly the steel that you use in construction, but it is essentially steel.
Yeah.
So I gave my samples to to Stanford, so that
definitely not Seth Rogen.
We do the analysis, and not the chemical analysis, but the isotope analysis. So Dr. Nolan and I took it to the lab. Dr. Nolan had 2 series of instruments that could do the analysis. We did both, and we confirmed essentially this. So there was no.
I heard Seth Rogen just won an award for being one of the least funny comedians.
If there was,
of the last 10 years or something like that.
Somebody manipulated the isotopes, which is not the hoax. Then you know for sure it's not a hoax because that's high caliber scientific laboratory work, and you need special instrument experts to interpret it.
Right, but that wasn't the case. Right. So
No,
the
it's not.
isotopes hadn't been manipulated. Have they found, because I've
Let me
heard
read.
this about Gary Moore in particular, that they do have samples of things that they can explain?
Read his
So I
says it on
gave
the
him essentially all my samples,
thing
all
that
the ones that I could relate to reliable cases. I don't want to give him junk.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of junk floating around that people think is strange. So yes, we're going through all those
or just hit me with
releases.
something.
And the idea is to publish it as we go. To publish everything as we go. There are some that give the indication of being, but as always in science, we have to be careful. Our colleagues will say, "Very good, congratulations, you did that with one instrument. Now, should we do it with a different lab, with a different machine, and see what they find?" Because Dr. Nolan has some of those machines are machines that he's invented at Stanford. Okay? That, but they are tied to biology. I mean, this is not biology. This is steel, okay? And this is iron or copper or whatever. So we have to redo it with a different type. So in this case, we have redone it with a different line of machines. There's a
Jacques Vallée is a venture capitalist, technologist, and prominent figure in the field of unidentified aerial phenomena.
extremely good.
His new book is Forbidden Science and Scattered Castles.
With the other machine, the biological machine, we get the whole.
The journals of Jacques Vallée from 2010 to 2019, or 2010 to 2019, yeah.
Radioactive elements.
So what samples have they found that have been the most compelling?
We're still working on that. But this paper is important, even though we didn't find something out of range. But that's, in a way, that's validation of what you have to do when somebody presents you with that kind of sample.
Basically, a scientific UFO guy.
Today. This is what the technology can tell. Okay. So this is sort of a stake in the ground.
I can't see the video, but I'm pretty sure
ET, okay?
Rogan's probably wearing his little silver astronaut suit.
But we've got the technology now, we know how to do it. One problem we had was that neither one of us is, an expert in materials. We're not experts in steel. So the people who, this was reviewed by, people who were materials experts. And they came back with a whole page of questions. Why didn't you look at this? Why didn't you measure that? So Dr. Nolan and the team had to redo about a year of work before they would accept the paper. So that's what you have to go through before scientists will look at it. But this one, is in the literature, in the scientific literature. It's not in some UFO magazine in New Mexico. And we have the methodology we can apply to the others. There are some that we've done with one machine where there are indications. Now, at Stanford, it's funny because you had 3 generations of people at Stanford looking at this. Before Dr. Nolan, I was there and I was gathering data and I was using the computer to do statistics and so on. And I worked for Professor Stewart, who unfortunately died a few months ago, over 100, but he was still working in astrophysics. And, I was on his astrophysics staff for a couple of years, looking at galaxies, looking at the structure of the sun, and looking at
well, there's several of those
strange stars.
He's been on the show, man.
So I was
10 or 12 times,
and we also looked at
Yeah, his conspiracies are pretty out there.
materials.
Where's this fucking truck
especially a
going?
case from Brazil, which he published.
Idiot.
He got financial support to do the isotope analysis. And some of it was arguably different. So we want to redo it. When he donated all his materials to me, when he retired. So I have all that and I passed it to Dr. Nolan. So Stanford now is acquiring a reputation as being a UFO analysis place.
Yeah, for sure.
But it went from essentially solar physics and very high energy physics.
Why is this fucking truck got its brights on?
Stewart, to me with
Idiots.
the computing center, and now with Dr. Nolan in the medical school. So we've had, they are.
Hey, you're gonna wait, motherfucker.
Well, I'm
In
glad you're
trouble.
willing to do that. I had heard that there was some alloy that was very difficult to comprehend that someone would be able to construct, that it would cost billions of dollars to make this particular type of alloy, that they had discovered something along those lines.
Well, I've seen those books. I've heard those things on the internet.
Yeah.
The question is, scientists will want to look at this. They want to know, well, how did you do it? How did
What's
you
everybody go through
prepare
hazards on?
the sample?
Right.
We were given access to a sample that in fact is very strange.
If he had his
it has
turning signal on,
different
I'd let him
colors
over, but
on
he's
it.
got his hazards on, so I don't know what the
Fits
fuck
in
he's
the
trying
palm
to do.
of your hand, so it's a significant size. Remember, Dr. Nolan
Basically, yeah.
at individual.
So I shot to the middle lane. I'm not even sure what lane disappears, if any.
So, anything more than 10 grams, we don't need. I mean, we can work with very little material. Although, of course, we want to do different things with different parts of it.
Right.
But this thing had some very interesting incrustation of some.
I only got about 48 miles left.
And all the people who had looked at it, including some official labs and some, signed a disclaimer saying they would not scrape off the interesting.
Oh, they have everything.
deposits that were
Eggsy.
Well, all of them did.
It's mostly
after
cannabis,
signing
though.
the thing, by the
But they'll
time
have
it
everything.
came to me, most of the interesting red stuff had been scraped off. So I don't know what they did.
Yes, he ain't visiting
so-
here.
And I don't know what machine they used. They didn't publish a paper. It took us 4 years to publish this paper. Okay, the paper came from Stanford with, PhDs, 4 PhDs writing it. So that's the bar is pretty high if you're
Right.
going to actually publish this in an international.
Well, it doesn't
review.
say anything. I don't see any alerts on my map.
Others, that's the plan.
If people want to find this, it says
It just shows traffic slowed down.
including isotope analysis.
I mean, it doesn't even say
applicable to the
accidents or
of
construction or
unusual
anything.
materials with potential relevance to aerospace forensics.
Yeah, he doesn't talk about UFOs.
There it is.
It's,
That's a very tricky way.
Well-
relevance to aerospace forensics.
people read between the lines.
Yeah,
and say,
that's
"Ha, ha."
what do you mean aerospace? Who's aerospace stuff? This is the question: if these encounters happened, if this egg-shaped craft was real, and if these small people-like things that breathe air did communicate with people, where are they from? Is this something that has always been here? Is this something that visits here? Is it something that is here?
So in the BASS project of Mr. Bigelow, that was funded by the Defense Intelligence Agency, we had a template of things that the Pentagon wanted to have. And it said, trajectory.
You hear they released the JFK files today.
Luminosity, radiation, and so on. Well,
Like 80,000 pages.
yeah, those are the things that you need.
A lot of it
if
is
you are
stuff that's
looking
already
at,
been released, but it's all unredacted this time.
Or you were looking at the Nimitz.
Yeah, it doesn't show anything. It just shows
it was.
the
But,
whole freeway is just slowing
it's not
down.
really relevant. I mean, in science, you don't start from the conclusions. You're going to look
I'm
at
imagining that the left
this is
lane
not something you've seen before.
closes off because there's nobody else coming up the left.
In the Nimitz case, we've all seen those.
The trucks are blocking the left lane behind me.
I've stopped counting how many papers there are from the New York Times on down with a picture of the photograph of that the F-18 was taking, the pilot took from it. Well, nobody mentions that this isn't a photograph. People think it's a photograph. So in the file, there is a memo.
Don't even come on until
from the
midnight.
folks at Raytheon. Raytheon makes the device, which is a big thing that you hang under the wing of an F-18 that's going to take these images. It's an image. It's not a photograph.
Well, so much for making it home by 11.
Into the infrared. It's not looking at the details. There is a number painted on the thing. It's looking at the heat. So when this was published by the New York Times, there was a very interesting memo with a little touch of humor from Raytheon to the Navy, saying, you know those things you've published? It was taken with one of the devices that we saw.
Where's this fucking truck going?
To put under the wing of your aircraft. It's not a camera, it's not a photographic camera. You gave us specifications for what you wanted us to build, and that's what we gave you. You wanted something that could measure the temperature of the exhaust of an
They're just letting them go all of a sudden.
To shoot down. The F-18 goes behind that Russian thing, MiG or whatever, and the camera is painting the exhaust from the Russian guy, so that you can distinguish between, American Airlines 723 and a MiG.
Right.
Okay, that's going to help you discriminate what kind of enemy you've got. Is it friend or foe first? If it's friend, you peel off, and that's fine. If it's an enemy, you're going to engage the guy. Okay, that's what we gave you. You didn't tell us you wanted a device to track flying saucers because we don't know what flying saucers are. If you do, we'll build one. And that memo is just so funny. It's an official. I make it a little bit funnier than it was, but it's an official memo, and it's very straightforward.
Jamie, see if you could find a good photograph, an image of the infrared image that was taken by those F-18s.
By Mexicans?
Yes. Of that Tic Tac. And then they also
I'm cool with that.
Video representation, the video of the thing taking off.
Mexicans don't scare me.
Some extreme rate of speed. That's it right there.
I have no Mexicanophobia.
Yeah, well, the radar said the radar said that it took off and popped up somewhere else, and so we accept that at face value because it's in the New York Times, and that may be true. In my work in venture capital, I've looked at all kinds of technology that's around, and so I go to technology meetings. Those are open; they are not.
Oh, come on, man! Why is this truck fucking behind me swinging out?
Device. We are looking for many.
I get fucked here.
Make in larger quantity. So I found myself in a conversation with a guy from one of the aircraft companies in Southern California, and I asked him, there is a device that has a funny name. like Discworld.
Hey, unindoctrinated.
And it measures it
Man, this goes for a while.
Radar signals.
I can see red lights way ahead of me.
DSPR.
Brake lights way out there in the distance.
Radar. And that gadget, I never heard of it, and it's actually not classified. Now, it was developed initially so that you could analyze radar data that was coming to you. If somebody was painting your aircraft on the radar, you could detect the characteristics of the radar pulse. Why would you want to do that? Well, you want to do that because
there's the truck that swung out on me right here.
What does it look like? You know, is it classified?
From behind me.
No, it's not classified. You know,
bye, bitch.
Many
You getting back in?
Civilian airplanes can carry it. You put it in the nose of your Piper Cub or whatever, and you fly around Los Angeles, and it will acquire the characteristics of all the radars in the Los Angeles area. Digitally, it's a digital thing. It's a computer. It's a
LVA
that requires radar data.
No notification.
Radar characteristics of any aircraft you want somewhere else.
Make sure the bell's on.
So if you want,
it's only my second stream today.
B-52 20 miles away, you turn on. I know I'm making it simple, but you program the thing, and you can redirect the defense, the air defense, for example, to another place.
So you can send a signal to another place that makes it look like there's a B-52 there.
Yes. Or make it look like you've disappeared in midair and reappeared somewhere else.
Oh.
Digitally. It's a digital radar feedback device that once you know the characteristics of the radars that are painting you, you can, I mean, obviously, suppose you want to travel to Moscow over the Iron Curtain without being shot down by the Soviet Air Force. You'd want to redirect all the radars. So, I mean, you're on 20 radars.
Right.
The SAIA is just a freight company.
Said about the Tic Tac was that when they encountered it,
it's actually out of Akron
or another
area,
blocking their detection signals.
Well, you know, I don't know this dirt from. I don't know how far it's gotten in the last.
These trailers here.
The guy was talking to.
Louisiana plates.
30 years ago.
Wow.
And I blew my
mind. They are Louisiana too.
You could do that.
Right. I didn't know until just now.
You could just paint. So that's. I'm not sure where the technology is and who is cleared for that. You know, pilots are cleared.
Yeah, according to Mark Rover, you'll drive through a wall with the autopilot.
They're not necessarily cleared for. So you.
I haven't steered in a while.
In the case of the Nimitz,
I do have the
what clearances
lane guidance on.
Pilots we see on TV, what clearances did they have? No, did they have the electronic countermeasure clearance? They don't necessarily have it. I mean,
yeah, the plates of that trailer up there.
Some of those
are Louisiana plates too.
About these images.
Looks like a newer trailer too.
The image didn't come from them.
Good shape anyway.
It came from one of their buddies.
Right.
You know, who came afterwards.
There's also the question of
so half
where
of the
they
data
take
is
place.
missing.
I've always questioned where they take place because they take place in the same areas where the United States always runs military training exercises. They take place off of San Diego, off of the East Coast.
Yeah, he just did a fake video
where we know that they run exercises.
He just lost his reputation big time.
If you were going to test
equipment, I think this was an international.
He blew his reputation.
Yeah, it was. But it was still off the coast of San Diego.
For a bag.
These things, which is why the fighter pilots
but it's not restricted. I mean, the Russians can fly there.
Right, not that area, but isn't the area off the East
I used to
Coast
love it, man.
Restricted?
his squirrel videos, his glitter bomb videos.
It says China's electronic war gadget turns small drones into flying stadium on radar.
Wow. January of this year, then I'll show you something else I found.
Wow, so they can make it look like...
I don't think they're protesting anything.
Like as big as a sports.
What is it, a protest?
Look at this. The effect, similar to a giant flying saucer suddenly materializing in midair, would be reminiscent of a scene from a science fiction film, but is achievable, according to a peer-reviewed paper published on January 8th. Whoa.
They just also, so then the month before that, there's their new stealth fighter that's painted with the stuff you just said that scatters the frequencies.
I'm not, this isn't my field.
Cool. Yeah, this is just something I stumbled across typing in the words he was saying.
Yeah, just pretty cool.
So they're testing this too.
What I was getting at was, if you're the United States government, if you're the military, and you have this kind of equipment and you want to test it, what better way?
Oh,
he people that don't know
he did a test with his. Just happened to be a company that he just now started sponsoring them their LiDAR into a car versus what he called was the self-driving of the Tesla, but it wasn't. And he literally was driving it manually until he was 3 seconds away from this wall, and then didn't even put it on the self-driving. He put it on the autopilot, which is not nearly enough time to do it. All you got to do is search it. And he's getting rolled for it. Oh, moving.
There were, in fact, tests of especially nuclear facilities. Not
wonder if they're like painting lines or something.
Military, but mostly the military facilities, to test the ability to penetrate the perimeter. So those flights are not.
I bet you that's what they're doing. I bet you this all boils down to them just painting lines.
So it's either a nuclear plant that makes fuel for bombs, or it's
we're starting to move pretty good.
Where nuclear weapons are stored, and there are guys around the perimeter with machine guns, and they're going to sound an alert if they see something coming over the fence. Well, suppose you come over the fence.
It's so weird.
It's also, are they going to start shooting or not?
No construction, nothing. I know there's a construction area up ahead. So I always run into it when I'm doing I'm coming back from Green Springs. I haven't gotten even to the Fremont area or exit yet. Oh no, I think I just passed it.
Some of those missions.
They fall in.
The plane looked like they put lights around it so that it can look like a flying saucer, essentially. Look like what a UFO. What would be a UFO to the guard? So that the guard is able to see if they can penetrate, if you can disguise yourself to the extent that psychologically you can.
Could it have been a roll block? I don't know. Well, we got brakes up again. Yeah. Still only doing 50.
I don't think they do hundreds of those. I think
looks like a lot of traffic ahead of me too. It's so weird.
But it's interesting that they have that ability. That's fascinating. That throws a lot.
Just heading back from Cleveland. Had a little bit of work to do out there. About 45 minutes from home.
The problem that I always have is that just the abundance of encounters, how simple what it must feel like. I've never had that experience, but what it must feel like to have that experience. That you probably would be I wouldn't be reluctant because I would know a person to talk about silly things. But if you're like a serious person, you have some sort of an encounter, I would imagine there's a lot of pressure on you to not tell people. If you're a lawyer or a doctor or you're any sort of like respectable person, so a serious individual in whatever you're doing for a career, you don't want people to associate you with nonsense or think that, maybe Mike is losing his mind.
you can't.
Yeah.
Because there are people relying on your ability to.
So maybe you tell your friends, maybe you tell your mother, maybe you tell your wife, but you probably don't tell the press. If you're a scientist, I would imagine you would have to have like significant evidence.
Well, we're up to 60 now, but
or your
we're
person
actually
like yourself
approaching
has
a
been
little
very
construction
brave
area.
for all these years, because you were talking about this stuff in the 1960s, which is pretty crazy.
Well, I had seen essentially flying
But that
saucers.
whole area that is slowed down to bumper, it was
So
Can you
nothing.
describe it?
I was
Nothing.
I grew up in a town that's about 45 minutes out of Paris, on the road to Normandy. And my father was a judge in that town for a while. And beautiful afternoon in the summer. I don't know the exact date.
Here we go.
It would have been late June or July. 1955. So I was about 15, 16. I was still in school, and then the following year I was going to go to the university. And my mother called me. I was working with my father, who was relaxing, doing some furniture, and I was helping him. And I heard my mother call from the yard, and went down and saw an object that was absolutely a saucer. It looked like it was over the steeple of there's a cathedral there. And we were
Fucking stinks here,
half
that's
a
for sure.
kilometer away from it. And it was just suspended. It was silver, and there was a clear.
All these guys in the left lane are going to try and get over now.
And we both saw
To
that.
fucking slow the fuck down.
It was very clear.
They got a mile to get over.
And then the next day, I asked a friend of mine from school, who was, we were the two good students in physics and so on. And I told him I had seen that. And he said he had looked at it with binoculars. He had seen it too. And he had looked at it with binoculars.
All these assholes. Less than a mile, and that left lane disappears, and all these people are racing up.
With a dome, a clear dome on top.
How long did you see it for?
I saw it for
half mile, boys.
Hopefully
you find a spot. Not.
I don't remember what I did.
This is what causes those backups right here.
Logically, I probably went inside.
Idiots like these.
So that I could see it.
And then when he came out, it was gone.
Look at this motherfuckers.
Well, he didn't even come out. He said it was probably one of the new planes that were flying around, because this was a time when the meteors and the early jets were being tried, and they were training pilots with them and so on, both for civil aviation.
Yeah, now you need to get over, huh?
For the Air Force in France. So said, well, let's wait. Maybe this.
Get the fuck over, asshole.
So I didn't say anything about
it. Get the
it.
fuck over.
Also, son of a judge, family of a judge isn't supposed to see strange things in the air over the town.
Right.
So it was sensitive.
What year was this? When you were 15? How old are you now?
It was 1955.
1955. So back then.
I was 15, 16.
Okay, so we could also apply that, like, if it was a jet, it would probably be very loud.
Well, and also it wouldn't just stand there.
Right, it wouldn't be able to just sit there. Was this thing quiet?
After that, I understood that it was. After that, I worked at Paris Observatory after I had my degree in astronomy, tracking satellites, tracking very early satellites. And we were a government office, so people were writing to us with what they had seen. And most of it we could explain. For one thing, they were seeing echo, and they were seeing some of the Russian rockets. And so we would write back. We had to write back to French citizen. I had a card with a French flag on it, and we were serving the population. So we would explain those things pretty much the way they do now. You've seen the moon rising through the fog, or you've seen satellite, so much Alpha 23.
Master the
But
zipper.
then there were cases where just, they saw something we could not explain. But then we would tell them
I
that
think the zipper is stupid. You
send it anywhere.
should not be running all the way up to the end of your fucking lane. Should be getting over way ahead of time.
Right, but that one
People that do it at the
experience
last fucking minute like that is what causes those backups.
Yeah. Well, if you hadn't been doing, I mean, the thing that's very important about people like yourself is that you're so
Car
careful
hauler.
in how you document
Car-
these things and the conclusions that you draw. Because I think this field of UFO study is filled with so many people that claim to have answers, claim to know things, and this is going to happen, and this is coming, and this is disclosure's imminent, and that's not. It never comes true. It's always just you're just left waiting for some new evidence that supposedly they have. And this is the more frustrating.
That should be the last
aspect.
construction
Like when
zone.
talking to Christopher Mellon, he's telling me
Until I get off the
high-resolution
turnpike.
photographs,
Knock
video.
on wood. I was
Oh,
only a
show me.
17-minute delay.
Show me some stuff. Show me something.
I was going to be home at 11:17 or 11 o'clock.
When I was 15,
No, 18-minute delay. Now it's
I don't have that
11:18.
experience that you have. I just have this fascination with it, but also tempered by a
Zip,
little
zip,
bit of cynicism,
motherfucker.
because there's so much malarkey that's attached to this subject.
Well, and some of it is, some of it is legitimate.
Yeah.
And I think ufologists in general, they want disclosure, but we don't know. I'm very respectful
11:18.
of, when I had clearances, I was just very respectful of those clearances because there are people who know what's on the other side of that.
Mm-hmm.
There was one case in the Air Force files.
I just dropped to 11:17 because I dropped the hammer.
In the index and I'm punching the card, and I put an asterisk
No worries.
there.
I'm on the clock still.
I had to ask Dr. Hynek, what
I'm on the clock till I get in the driveway.
And he said, yeah, I can. There was enough time.
Mileage and hours.
I can tell you, this came from a woman in Alaska called
dumb
the
fuck.
Air Force.
Swinging out into the fast
She saw
lane.
what she thought was a flying saucer, something that should not have been there. It was dark on the ground, but the sky was still light, and there was definitely a light that looked like it was under power, that was flying
Less than the speed limit.
west. Now, west of Alaska,
There's a cop hitting up ahead.
there's a Korea Peninsula and there's the Soviet Union. So she thought it was a UFO. So it was reported as a UFO, but it was classified, and it was called unidentified. Well, that was an inside joke. It was a U-2. But this was at sunset, and the U-2 was illuminated by the sun. Which, U-2 is painted in such a way that it shouldn't be visible from. But there are some
I didn't see that cop
conditions where you're going to see it. And so it was classified, and if you had the clearance,
We're still about 35 minutes away from home.
It would be listed in the statistics as unidentified.
But it
They
was
knew
actually a U-2.
exactly what it was from the beginning.
So some things are listed as unidentified because it's so classified.
Sure.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
I have no problem with that.
Right.
But tell me if you ask me to write a computer program about it.
Right.
Tell me if it's worth my time or not.
What was your take on the Ryan Graves stuff? Like Ryan Graves and the
So
fighter
live.
pilots that started seeing these squares within a sphere?
To me, that's still a question, and the people I talk to are still wondering, what is that? It there are the, strange physical systems that are floating around to gather faint signals, and they have very strange shapes. Okay? So it could be, those are balloons within balloons with little things attached to them, going back to the days of 1947, looking for atomic explosions, Russian. And that's the way the Russian atomic tests were detected first, was uh, balloons that had large antennas.
Mm-hmm. The thing about the Ryan Graves stuff, though, is the physical characteristics and the way it moves. That these things are able to stay stationary in 100+ knot winds.
I don't know.
You don't know. Yeah.
I have not researched it, and I wouldn't be the guy to research it.
If we are being visited, how many different civilizations do you think are visiting us? Because if there's all these different characteristics that these beings have, if some of them look like tall, albino, almost like human beings with large eyes, some of them look like the Greys, some of them look like dwarfs.
Yes, and that's an embarrassment of riches.
Right.
Of course, that opens a question. Is it a simulation? And Rizwan has published a couple of books about that. He's a friend of ours, and Dr. Nolan, and we've had many conversations about that. We could be living in a simulation.
Yes.
Where the people running the simulation might send whatever they want. It would be like a video game.
Right.
So all of a sudden we've got to do it. But that's not completely, you can only go so far. In fact, first reaction is, well, but look at the detail. We can't reproduce the detail on that scale. That's true, but wait 10 years and we'll be able to do it.
Right.
Quantum computing.
Right.
So that's not a good argument. It's an okay argument now, but it doesn't stand the test. The other argument is, who would be doing it and why? I mean, that's true that there are some strange things. I mean, the fact that the moon is exactly the size to hide the sun.
Yeah.
It's exactly
perfectly
30 minutes of arc, like the sun. So it gives us total eclipse.
Wow, that dude's in a hurry.
Measuring to the Greeks knew roughly how far the sun was with respect to the moon. They knew the ratio of the distances. They didn't get the exact distance, but they already knew that because they had done the math, the geometry. So that's pretty strange.
And it also protects our environment.
And there are lots of things on Earth that seem to be accidental.
Oh, I just cut that truck off. Damn.
Yeah.
So,
the right lane, he cut that truck off. Look at that guy's truck's still pissed. You can see.
Happy with that.
Is he getting off the freeway? Yeah, he's getting off the turnpike there.
It's very compelling. What's fascinating to me is that it is inevitable. That if technology advances the way it is currently, within maybe even our lifetime, or within another lifetime, another 100 years, we will most certainly have an artificial reality that's you cannot discern, indiscernible between that and the reality we currently experience.
Yes.
So if that's inevitable, you would kind of assume that perhaps it's already taken place. And if it had a place, it would probably be very similar to what we're experiencing. Whereas enough of it seems fake, and enough of it seems scripted, enough of it seems very coincidental, how things line up.
The freeway was dark and the sky was still blue. She said, I saw an elongated object, which was like, to me, twice L747, with what people would probably think of as portholes or windows.
There we go.
They were just lights along the thing. The thing was elongated.
Did it both
And
directions?
was
It crashed
moving
once.
slowly, minding its own business. It must be on 10 radars including the airport. And it was moving over, and then the sky was perfectly clear, no clouds, no fog.
It's
It
crazy.
blended with the
Did that heading both ways about the same
I
time.
could just see the outline. So
Almost 2 hours
didn't
in.
speed up. I could see the lights, and I could see the lights fading, and then there was nothing there. And I remember in your lecture in the 80s, you talked about things that could be going into another dimension. Okay, but I thought that was interesting. The kids thought it was an interesting idea. Um, and yeah, in science, people talk about different dimensions in physics. And so
Hey, Toe.
but I had never seen it mentioned anywhere else. So there it was. This thing faded from our universe, and I have no idea where it went. But it didn't speed up. So
They
I
have
said,
radar
thank you
data
very
on that?
much. Can I publish that? He said, no way. I'm the CEO of an international commercial company. We work in several countries,
Jody.
and I can't have my name associated with it. Now, I've had
We've
probably
got about
a dozen
25 minutes
cases
left
like
of the
that
drive.
with people from Silicon Valley, people, they report on Wall Street about how their company is doing. they don't want a reporter saying, "Are you the same guy who sees flying saucers? You know, you're the CEO of this such and such microchip company in San Jose." You know, so they don't report it, but they want me or some of my colleagues to know about it because they know it could contribute to the research we're doing. And Dr. Nolan has had that experience as well, as you know. And but it's not going to the Air Force. It's not going to the newspapers. It's not going to the New York Times. Now, if those things can, just jump out
I don't know
of
why
our
this guy
universe
felt
and
the
go
need to get in
somewhere
front of me.
else, that rewrites the whole thing. We're not talking about propulsion the way we think about propulsion. We're not talking about environment. We're not talking the passage of time, in the same way that I would experience with my watch and so on. We're talking about something as the rules are different, and we need to grow up and start thinking along those rules, or at least the possibility of those rules. That doesn't prove that there is another universe 5 minutes ahead of us, but there could be. And then all the papers published saying there couldn't be flying saucers because there isn't life, closer than 2,000 light years from us, and they would take at the speed of light. It would take 2,000 years to get here. Well, there could be another universe 5 minutes ahead of us to get here. So that would explain why we have visitations throughout history, and they look the same throughout history because our technology. I mean, this technology of this microphone didn't exist 20 years ago.
Right.
It's a new microphone, and there were no microphones. 200 years ago.
There you go.
Microphones at all.
Right.
So.
Oh, we got pond water in my backyard you can drink.
Those things look the same.
Makes the dog
How
sick.
can we compare
Sure as hell
them to
make you
something
sick.
somebody saw in the 18th century?
Right.
That shouldn't happen, unless your technology is stuck.
Right. Yeah, that is a fascinating aspect of it. Right. You would expect that if you thought about how fast our technology evolves, technology from 1947 from some other planet would be exponentially more advanced than what we experienced in 47. It's just based on how our technology evolves.
And you have to think, we think about an aircraft in ways completely different. There are things that, yes, it came from the Wright brothers and so on. And there were speculation before on how you could fly. But what an aircraft does today is radically different. The whole physics is different.
And we're only talking about 100 and some years ago, which is pretty crazy. You go from this thing that Wilbur and Orville Wright, kind of like get it to take some air for a little bit, to the Chinese jet, which is disguising itself from radar and travels at insane speeds. And then the possibility of other propulsion systems that have been kept under wraps.
To the Harrier that stays.
Yes, and then lands like that. Yeah. No, just the technology that we know that we're aware of over the last 200 years is pretty extraordinary. If you imagine something from somewhere that's had thousands of years to evolve past us.
Yeah, a couple of things I wanted to bring up that are in the book. Well, one is in the book, the other one isn't. What's in the book is I've tried to continue the parapsychology experiments that were done at SRI, now at lots of other places. And I got advice from people who said if you put yourself in some types of conditions, you could try to manifest another form of intelligence, essentially an apparition. It's not necessarily related to UFOs, but if you can do that, that would teach you what to do some of the encounters of people describe. the witnesses tell me. So if I'm a good scientist, I should put myself in their place first and experience it myself. So I did a couple of sort of mental experiments like that in my home. I was alone at the time in my home, and nothing happened. And then nothing like what I expected happened. And then I was asleep one night, and all of a sudden I'm propelled outside of my body into another room, and there is an entity, a massive sort of rectangular mass, entity. Clearly, something that knows where it is.
Oh,
and
the wind.
is thinking. I'm terrified, not terrified so much of the entity. It's like a sort of black, rectangle. Uh, but I'm terrified of being outside my body. I know people do experiments with that. There are people who can do it almost at will. I've never tried to do that because I've heard.
Let my steer assist control it. It's not doing a very good job. It's got me all over the place.
So I'm terrified. I find myself back in my body. I I sit up, completely terrified.
Getting off the freeway in 4 miles.
Screaming, which is not usual, because it was just, it really was horrible. Then I rationalized it. The experience wasn't supposed to happen outside of my body. When people describe entities, like Whitley Strieber describes it and so on, there is a very strong psychic impact. And to me, that was very shocking.
Hear that? It yelled at me to take the wheel. It's too windy.
It happened since. I'm not trying to make it happen, but I wanted to flag it to get advice mostly from other people.
Did you feel compelled to try it again?
I would try it again.
But you have not yet. No.
See?
No.
You won't even keep that there.
I want to get counsel from,
Yeah.
my peers.
That's like similar to the monolith in 2001, right? Yeah.
Well, there's a scientist I know well in Silicon Valley who also started a number of companies that are publicly traded now, who invented the integrated circuit. His name is Federico Fagin. He's a physicist from Italy, a PhD from Italy. He came to Silicon Valley in the very early days of the transistor, worked with the initial teams in those places. And then, there was a problem of how can you pack those things together in smaller and smaller places. And he's, recognized as the father or one of the 2 or 3 people who invented the integrated circuit. So for a long time he was celebrated in that capacity. What he didn't say is that he had seen the design outside of his body one night, and that he had had multiple experiences outside of his body. Now, this is someone, one of the fathers of Silicon Valley. I recognize him as one of my mentors, in venture capital, in high technology investment. Now he started to, he's made enough money that he doesn't care anymore, and he's sort of semi-retiring. He doesn't like what's going on right now, and he's probably going to go back to Europe. But there are a number of people like that whose names are in the Wall Street Journal or in the New York Times, who've achieved something, uh, but you find out that they also had, and they experimented. In his case, he experimented systematically with, the ability to go out of his body.
And acquire this information from some other source
Well,
or vision.
there isn't much. There are a couple of books that mention, steps you can take, but it seems to be pretty much up to the individual. In my case, I certainly wasn't trying to do that. I was precipitated instantly to the place where this being was. Um, there were also a couple of things that I never wrote about, not that I wanted to hide them or was afraid of them, but I wanted to understand the context of it before I did. And I talk about it in this book. Um, in the late 70s, my first wife, Janine, was a psychologist. We bought a place in the country in Northern California, place in the redwood forest, because I wanted to re-experience the pleasure of doing astronomy as an amateur, a small telescope and so on. But I don't care. I want to look at the moon. I want to look at planets. I want to look at uh, Magellanic, clouds, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And the so we built this. We had there was a house there, but I built an observatory in the middle of the forest. Our closest neighbor, this was a redwood forest, uncluttered and unspoiled, pretty much inaccessible.
Yeah, there's the airport.
If you didn't own the land,
we just got to drive around it.
Cut the trees. So there were some old redwoods there, and the closest neighbor was about 3/4 miles away, 3/4 of a mile away. And I thought this is going to be like a discontinuity in the forest, and maybe it will attract whatever is out there. And maybe we'll see UFOs. We never did. We owned the place for 18 years. We'd go there with our kids, and it was wonderful. And but went there not every weekend, but pretty much as much as we could. And then our kids grew up and moved away. We moved back to the city. We sold the place. The last night, of course, we had cleaned the place. We were selling it to friends of ours, who were our neighbors, at a winery. They wanted to expand the land. We had some flat land they wanted to use for the wine, and they wanted the house. And so the last night, everything has been moved out. My wife is still there because we had a car that was going to be taken back to the city, and she had her car, and she was ready to go. Middle of the night, there's a light that's filling the house. No, by then there are no curtains, nothing. Filling the house, blue, sort of UV, white, blue, ultraviolet light. She goes outside, and the light is making everything clear, the forest, everything else. And it's moving. It doesn't have a specific shape. It's like a mass of light with light all around it, and it's going down the driveway, which is a dirt road, to the main road, to the small road. And it's just moving along politely in front of the ranch and down, down to the street. It has no business being there. No sound. It's not a car. It's not a car on fire. It's not. the light, again, everything is, all the details are there. You can see the grass, you can see the leaves on the trees. And why that?
Maybe
The
you
only-
called for it and it took a long time to get there.
Well, yeah, or they just wanted to say goodbye. Or I
Yeah,
don't know.
maybe. Maybe they were there the whole time and they just didn't want to show themselves.
We don't
There
see the
was-
Ford dealer from this direction.
There was one time we used to sleep in the observatory. There was a small bedroom
Coming in from the airport
with all
side.
books that I collected, and she saw
Get around, go around the airport, then shoot straight south into the
that was
into the woods.
people described a small light. She didn't see from where it went, and it was moving along the walls of two of them, and then it vanished. She woke me up, but I had not seen it. It was gone by the time.
I talked to a man when I went to visit Skinwalker Ranch. There was a few people wanted to talk to us, but then once we brought the cameras out, only one guy wanted to talk to us. And he was very rational, very normal.
I seen somebody faking autism the other day.
He told the story
at a gym.
ball of light that entered through his home. And it seemed to be...
Yeah, same thing. She was doing one of her gym videos,
He felt like
but was faking
if not a living thing, controlled
autistic, the muscle movements and stuff.
Then it went through the walls and disappeared again. So
Ridiculous.
he was home for a few minutes. He's moving around.
Seen that on Twitter.
As you know, Mr. Bigelow has done
Correct.
experiments of his own.
Yeah.
Lights, things like that. Putting
No shame.
interesting objects in certain places.
Anything to make money without having to do nothing.
And seeing if something is going to look around and then it's very, very interesting.
It was such a fascinating subject. And like I said, I really appreciate all your years of research and the way you're so measured and so objective in your analysis. It helps people like myself
I
get
know.
at least some sort of an understanding of what's going on.
That's when you think folks can't get any lower.
What's important is to have
Hold my fucking beer.
Yes.
to some of the people you know, try to learn from them and sort of refine my own program.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. In your book, again, the one that's available now, this is Forbidden Science 6. This is the sixth
Yeah, me too.
of these books.
I'm getting tired.
Scattered Castles is a
Glad that
it comes from the classified world. It's a repository of classified
this
projects.
is almost over.
So if you're cleared at a certain level, you want to know what else is there that you would have access to, or where certain things are being sent to you, and you're authorized to. You could look up
Yeah.
the names of
Whoever's
those
still here,
projects. It
chat
won't tell
us.
you what the project does, unless you're cleared for it, but it will tell you that there is a project. And so those names of secret projects are picked by the computer, they're random. And I thought this was funny. Scattered Castles is sort of like, all these files about strange UFOs and strange creatures.
Well, I can't wait to read it. Thank you so much. Thank you for everything. It was great having dinner with you and help put off everybody else last night as well. So I really appreciate that.
You remind me of a Sunday back home in old Kentucky. The church choirs just fell into the pines. And I love you like the mountains. Love's the way the morning opens. Too soft and bright, greeting from the sun. So if it make you
You're joking, right?
I wouldn't act so wavy all the time. I wouldn't keep it all inside, and I'd let you know how much I loved you every day. Darling, will you stay right here and shake this frost off of my bones? Well, I used to ride a Mustang, and I'd run that thing on high hopes. They raised the price of drinks so high I couldn't pay. So I let that car just sit there when I should have took you driving.
Oh, you're not joking.
Windows down while the music played. So it can make you stay. I wouldn't act so wavy all the time. I wouldn't keep it all inside. I'd let you know how much I loved you every.
Well, he's gone through a transition.
Always stay right here. Shake this frost off of my. Always stay right here. Shake this frost off of my.
No worries.
I'm a stone's throw from the mill, and I'm a good walk to the river. My working day is over. We'll go swim the cares away. Put your toes down in the water and a smile across your face. Tell me that you love me, lovely lady May. Now I ain't the sharpest chisel, darling. I could love you well till the road's cold. I've seen my share of trouble. I've held my weight in shame, but I'm baptized in your name.
No, he's not going to be Miss Dirty. Kind of becoming a philosopher. You have a good night, guys.
As the waltzes o'er the leaves, been rushing through my timber till your love brought on the spring. Now the mountains are blushing, and they don't know what to say, except a good long line of praises for my lovely lady May. Now I ain't the toughest hickory that your axe has ever fell, but I'm a hickory just as well. I'm a hickory also. I came crashing through the forest as you cut my roots away.
Night all. Thanks for hanging out. I appreciate it. Makes the ride a whole lot easier. I'm tired. See you guys tomorrow. Thank you.